Earlier this year, I began the 88th Armory with the idea of adding some variety to my, and maybe some viewers' arsenals by looking at weapon and Warframe builds that can work for the mid-game, where we play a lot of Warframe's experience and see what might make it into or close to the endgame. What I found in doing this was that I want to put everything on the table. Warframe is a game most often played in the mid-tier of its difficulty. This means facing enemies that are somewhere from 25 to 45 in level, give or take 5 levels. But what I found in attempting to point out in some of these weapons and builds that I enjoy in my mid-game play was that there are tons more to be had than even I thought. What we're looking for here is more variety, more fun in our Warframe experience. I still want to focus on more weapons, builds, and combinations for the mid-tier of the game where we often have a lot of our play, but I want to put all options on the table to find these elements of enjoyment through diversity, which is a lot of what Warframe has to offer. I'm Scott from Ramble Entertainment, and this is the new version of Season 1 of the 88th Armory. Let's find our fun, let's find our variety. Today, on this new version of the 88th Armory, what I want to look at first is Saryn's Telos Contagion cloud. And this build really has a lot of moving, working parts, but really what we want to look at is the Contagion Cloud mod. That's what I want to focus in on here today and get working within the game. Have this fun build for this specific mod with these specific weapons to add more variety to the game. Now, I did that with a new intro. I talked about that stuff with the new intro, but since this is the first of this new kind of version of videos, let's talk about a few things before we get right into it. So, basically, the new version of the 88th is where I just want to look at builds. 3 days a week, maybe even get up to 4 days a week. Since this is the first week, I'm going to look at 2 builds. I'm going to shoot for 3 videos, but I might only get 2 in. I also want to do a State of the Frame this week, where I talk about focus. They talked about focus, taking a sledgehammer to the system. I think that is a great way to start talking about it, and so I want to take some time to talk about it before anything starts moving around it. So, with the new version of this show, I don't want to do things with the codex entry too much. I'll still look at weapons. I'll still say, like, hey, let's look at this weapon that really people don't talk about much or use much. But I want to be able to put everything on the table. I want to say, let's look at the Tigris Prime and not go for 100% status. What might that look like? Things like that. So I think Warframe has a ton of variety to offer, so let's go ahead and get into that. So my first idea with this was, okay, so the Telos Boltace projects this huge attack aura from the melee weapon itself, and so I wanted to, when I was thinking about Saryn, I was just like, well, what about Toxic Lash? And wasn't there a Toxic Lash augment that nobody really uses? And so my Saryn is really typically a bomb builder. You know, you put out your skin, your, of course, I can't remember the actual name of the move, even though I use it all the time, her molt, and then you attach spores to it, you destroy the spores, and then if enemies actually start to close in on you, because most of my bomb building builds use a ton of range, then you just use miasma to detonate the bomb and add corrosive procs and more ticks of damage over time. And maybe eventually we'll look at that build too. But with all of this in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at what the first build for this style of play actually looked like, my first iteration of this. So this was the first iteration of this build that I really gave a shot. I went with Blind Rage for more damage coming out of the Toxic Lash, and of course Spores, Molt, and Miasma 2. However, the hit to duration really just didn't jive with what I was aiming for. I tested this in the Void to utilize energy gains, and I think in this build I wasn't using Zenuric, I was still using Naramon, and I'll go over the differences between using both of those with this build coming up. But yeah, by comparison, the Blind Rage and Fleeting Expertise I don't think was the right direction to go for this. Instead, what I land on is more of a Transient Fortitude, so again, this kind of balance that Saryn has, less damage, but across more range with more duration for more ticks over a given amount of time. This kind of concept of a toxin setting in. So let's go ahead and look at those. So the footage we have now going on in the background is defense, so stepping up the testing, basically converting the build into less strength, more duration for more of kind of this balanced Saryn feel. I don't want to go too heavy on range and sacrifice the damage that your Toxic Lash can really add to the Telos Boltace is, because Saryn truly feels like a more balanced frame between all the stats after her rework. And so yeah, this is what I stick with, and I really think that a lot of the choices for myself, again, these are my builds, you know, this is just to give you an idea of maybe something to aim for, something to enjoy, and you'll want to suss out what you're more comfortable with for yourself if you choose to make a Telos Toxic Lash kind of Contagion Cloud build. Now, additionally, I think that this is also more of a compressed space kind of build. Basically, I went to this defense and I was thinking, okay, this will actually be better on a survival, but I actually do think that, so I was leaning towards Naramon for this build, and now I'm actually back on Zenuric's side for it. I'm typically a Zenuric user, but I do think Naramon has a great application here, but I think there is more scaling for Saryn's moves with the Zenuric school of focus, where basically, because the Telos Boltace doesn't climb with body count or doesn't get the combo multiplier going, you can, but you have to actually hit the enemies. You can't just do the slide twirls, the spin attacks. So basically, I think that does cause a limitation from the melee side of the build. And real quick, let's go ahead and pull up the melee side of the build. I should just be able to do this on the fly. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. What a shock I wasn't able to pull it up on the fly, but let's go ahead and take a look at this, my original build for the Telos Boltace. I was thinking, okay, so I need more survivability to actually make this work. So originally I had a Life Strike, and now I actually decide in the conversion that whether you're with Naramon or just go with Zenuric with basically a support Sentinel with your Shield Charger, your Life, your Meta Ray, your Guardian, basically you really don't need that survivability. Part of that also boils down to simply realizing that a compressed space, I feel like, is actually better for this build. I kind of talked about this with Inaros last week, where basically I kind of called his ability to use Sandstorm in a hallway being a hallway hero, where often we will go try to control these large spaces or function within these large spaces or do damage over 50 meters, etc., etc. Whereas there is plenty of room for a lot of different builds to be hallway heroes, and I think that this Telos Boltace Contagion Cloud Toxic Lash build for Saryn actually is a hallway hero build for her. So yeah, like I was saying before that YouTube video reset, instead what I do is I swap Killing Blow here. So when you're so this isn't really the best choice for Naramon, but with Zenuric, when your energy gains aren't outweighing your energy cost, like this build where it's relatively cheap comparatively, you can add Killing Blow and, of course, channel your energy into the melee weapons to scale the damage when you're in the Xenuric School of Focus. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that play actually looks like in a survival for Saryn. So here in this footage, I step up the build to finally start testing it against higher level enemies, roughly 35 to 50 enemies level, with a Naramon build. And a couple things I want to highlight before I just let some footage play for you guys to kind of absorb the video in the background, absorb what's going on without all the graphics, without me rambling over the video. I just want to point out that probably one of the big drawbacks is Maiming Strike to this build. It's not an easily acquired mod. You would have had to get it from one of the 2 times the Acolytes have shown up, and it's a rare mod, and it's also pretty expensive to acquire. 150 platinum seems to be about an average going price, and I would say if you can get it for cheaper and you don't have it, you definitely want to. Now, I wouldn't say that's an accurate pricing, that's just my own personal assessment, so make sure that you do your own personal assessment before buying. Anyway, so let's go ahead and let this play out for about a minute or two, and then I'm going to come back when we start looking at the Xenuric gameplay comparatively, and I'm going to talk about the benefits and the drawbacks to each of them. So, enjoy!
Additional life support has arrived. I've delivered another life support capsule.
So concluding the ideas behind this build, again, we wanted to focus on Contagion Cloud in conjunction with the Telos Boltaces, and now that we're on the Xenuric footage, as you could see, I had and maintained constant energy maximization, and of course I'm not cloaking when I'm melee killing, so that also shows that this is the Xenuric survival. Basically, I think this comes down to a few things. As we can see, I'm in a more compressed space here, and it also comes down to personal preference. Of course, it always comes down to personal preference. I liked being able to utilize miasma and spores in conjunction with molt, while also using Toxic Lash, which I think is one of these abilities that just doesn't have as much utility as the other ones do when you're building for the other abilities. But here, using the Telos Boltace, we do have the opportunity to actually really maximize that abilities and this augment's utility, and we do it in a more confined space, and I think this is a build that will definitely be a lot of fun to take out on the mobile defenses, on anything where you're just defending a point in space, say the Fortress Assault defenses, even survivals. I think this is a pretty darn fun build, and also you could even probably maximize this on Excavation, where you have all these typical paths that enemies are going to walk through, and just getting some melee kills right there will help you to put more DPS down on the battlefield. Really, this is kind of this environmental control style build. I think that the Boltace as a weapon itself really isn't where we find our scaling damage with this build. I think that a lot of the scaling damage really comes from Saryn and her abilities, getting viral procs to reduce health, using miasma to cause corrosive damage, and creating toxic clouds for enemies to walk through, with Toxic Lash in conjunction with Contagion Cloud on the Telos Boltace. So in conclusion, I really think that this build has a lot of potential for fun, but could also help climb a bit, maybe get up into level 50 or even 60 enemies, especially in conjunction with Xenuric. Again, I'm not really a Naramon user too much, it's not my thing, but I would be excited to see what a Naramon user could really do with this build. And this is what I really want the new 88th to be. I want it to be a lot of unique builds, a lot of different weapons, and even looking at Riven mods coming out for console. I played on PC, but my primary account is on console. I think Riven mods are going to present to us a lot of opportunity for a lot of unique builds and a lot of different kind of variety and fun within our Warframe gameplay. I've been Scott of Ramble Entertainment, and this is the new 88th Armory, where you can expect a lot of variety and a lot of fun and a lot of different builds. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do the thing, and we'll see you next time.